Welcome to Ian Cameron's Football Frenzy right here on Pub Sports Radio, the Pub Sports Radio YouTube channel. Thursday, October 22nd. It's hard to believe that we're in week 7. Yeah, week 7 here in the NFL football season. Just amazing how quickly, year in and year out, this league, it just flies by, and we're almost at the halfway mark of the season when it feels like it just began a couple of days ago. So let's get right to it. Let's try to keep this in a tight, compact type show in terms of the time. I like to try to keep it within an hour. That's easier said than done with me because sometimes I like to ramble on some of these games, but let's get started. Let's go right into this week rather than look back on last week. New York Giants, Philadelphia Eagles, Thursday night football. Someone's got to win this division, and believe it or not, Giants and Eagles with one win on the season, still either of these teams could win the NFC least. That is how pathetic this division has been so far. The money has come in on the New York Giants this week in this game. The Eagles opened a 6.5-point favorite, now down to about 4.5 in most places. The total, 45 right now. That's been going back and forth as well. We've had some over money, some under money go back and forth throughout the course of the week. This is a very interesting football game tonight, Eagles and Giants. From a Giants perspective, there's been problems on offense. Of course, we know without Saquon Barkley, that's really hurt them because you had him to rely on to run the football. Now the Giants, they're not running the football as well, although the offensive line is a big part of that, as well as failing to protect for Daniel Jones at a consistent level. Ball security continues to be a problem for Daniel Jones as well. I mean, they're trying everything. They signed Devontae Freeman, of course, former Atlanta Falcon. Let's see if he can bring them anything in terms of a ground game. And, Daniel Jones needs it. Daniel Jones is not going to be that quarterback that if it's a one-dimensional offense where the run gets shut down and he's got to bring home the bacon exclusively with his arm in the passing game, it's not going to work out too well for him and for the New York Giants. So can they establish the ground game? That's going to be key. That's not going to be easy to do against the Eagles. One of their strengths is their defensive front. So I worry about this matchup a little bit for the Giants. And I also worry about the fact that, they never seem to beat the Eagles. They have had a really, really tough time in terms of being able to, beat this Philadelphia team in recent years. The Philadelphia, there is some good news in terms of, because this has been a banged up team. It's really unfathomable that Carson Wentz has had to deal with everything he's had put on his plate here in terms of injuries on the offensive side of the football. Miles Sanders, the running back now, not going to play tonight. Of course, Alshon Jeffrey, they were kind of holding out hope he'd be ready to make his season debut tonight. That's not going to happen. There is some good news, though. Lane Johnson back on the offensive line. That's a tremendous upgrade for the Eagles. It's crazy how we talk so much about Lane Johnson. Is he going to play week to week? But he is a key cog on that offensive line. And when he doesn't play, that is a much inferior unit, top to bottom. It looks like he's going to be ready to go tonight. And also back, finally, for the Philadelphia Eagles, Deshaun Jackson, finally ready to play. And he'll be good to go tonight and on the field for the Eagles here in this game. And one thing I'll say, I don't know how this happened, because for 3 quarters last week against Baltimore, with players dropping to injury left and right on the offensive side of the football, Miles Sanders, Zach Ertz, of course, gets injured in that game. He's now on IR. And now all of a sudden your top 2 tight ends as well are on IR. Not only Ertz, but Dallas Goedert's been out now for multiple weeks. That means it's time for Richard Rodgers, who is, of course, part of the Green Bay Packers previously in his career with Aaron Rodgers, and they called them, I remember, Rodgers and Rodgers. Well, Richard Rodgers is now your starting tight end for the Philadelphia Eagles. Giants, by the way, terrible defending tight ends. So if you're interested in player props, maybe you look toward Richard Rodgers tonight, believe it or not, for the Philadelphia Eagles, as he's going to get the lion's share of snaps at that position for them in tonight's game. I was impressed with Wentz. Okay, Wentz has an offensive line that's been banged up and bruised and injury-riddled all season. And last week they didn't have Lane Johnson, who will be there, of course, tonight. They lose Miles Sanders. Jalen Reagor, their draft pick from this past year's on IR. Of course, they lose Zach Ertz in that game. They're down to basically Travis Fulgham, who's been outstanding. And by the way, until proven otherwise, you have to give strong consideration every week now moving forward to look at Travis Fulgham in terms of props. Now, I know Deshaun Jackson's back, so that is finally going to give Carson Wentz another legit, upper echelon type weapon in the receiving game tonight for the Eagles, but you still got to like what you've seen out of Travis Fulgham, the Old Dominion product. He's been unbelievable. He's been an unsung hero, really, for this Eagles offense and for Carson Wentz making plays, but it's still a really good thing for the Eagles to at least have Jackson, because now you have Jackson and Fulgham. I'm not going to say that's a great 1-2 combo at receiver, but it's certainly better than what you had prior to this game. Greg Ward and, Arcega-Whiteside. I mean, it really, really got thin in terms of skill position talent for the Eagles at wide receiver. So that's going to be a help for them. Defensively, I think their defensive front against the Giants O-line is a concern if I'm New York, because they haven't been able to run the football consistently. Daniel Jones has taken too many hits. He's fumbled the ball too much. I think the Eagles' defensive front, and when you look at the Philadelphia Eagles, they face some better quarterbacks, better offensive lines than some of the teams they've played, than this Giants team that they're going to play here. With this number is screaming, I should be betting Philadelphia here, and I'm certainly leaning to the Eagles at -4.5, but here's the issue. You got to lay points with the Eagles. That's number one. Number two, the Giants have been not just good, they've been unbelievable as road underdogs. How about 13-2 against the spread in the last 15 games as a road underdog for the New York Giants? This has been, even with all the complete shit show that they've had as a franchise for the last few years, the failed era with Pat Shurmur, which didn't go well at all. That didn't go well. The previous coach before that didn't go well. It's just been a terrible run for the New York Giants. But the one thing they've done well during that time, it's probably the only thing they've done well, is they've covered point spreads as road underdogs. It's been a good role for them. And wouldn't shock me completely if somehow, some way, this is a 3-point game for somebody when it's all said and done. This game isn't even close to being a game I'm interested in betting. It didn't even come close to one that I pulled the trigger on. I do think fundamentally there are some things to like here for Philadelphia. Their offensive line getting healthier. They're getting Jackson back at wide receiver. They're getting, their defensive front against this very, very weak offensive line, which, by the way, for the Giants, will have Andrew Thomas back, the Georgia draft pick from last year, who's really been disappointing so far. He has not performed, to that level that the Giants certainly were hoping when they drafted him last year in the first round. He was actually sat down because he was that bad last week. He's apparently going to be back and available again tonight. But, their offensive line against the one thing Philadelphia can do well is get some pressure, with that front. And that's a worrisome matchup here for me for the Giants. So I think fundamentally, it's a decent matchup here for Philly. But again, you got to lay 4.5 with a 1-win team that has not been able to get out of their own way. That even though they have Jackson and Lane Johnson back on the offensive line and Jackson at receiver, this is still a very, very injury-riddled team. So it's just the lightest of leans for me to Philadelphia, but that's as far as I'm going to go with it. Plus, if they've just owned the New York Giants in recent years, you really can't ignore that. So lean to me to Philadelphia here at home. The Giants, to me, even though they got that first win last week, if you watched it, that was self-inflicted wounds by Washington, the football team, scoop and score touchdown that the Giants scored. If not for Ron Rivera, well, first of all, Ron Rivera, I don't mind him going for 2, but if they make the 2, we're not even talking about the New York Giants winning that game last week. So it was a very, very fortuitous win for the New York Giants last week. And then everyone in the chat, welcome in. Colorado Bull Pie Guy Jansen, welcome in. A good friend of ours. Beach Boss, Asher. Yeah, I mean, this is one of those, and I remember the great Dave Malinsky, may he rest in peace. He's one of my all-time favorite people in the handicapping and betting industry that I've met and known over the last 15, 20 years. He would always say, this is a take 7, lay 4 type of game. That's what this game feels like. It feels like if this point spread was 7, I'd be wanting the Giants +7. With this point spread in that 4.5 range now, I'm more interested in Philadelphia. So when you get that kind of game, it's not enough of an edge for me to get involved. So that's why I'm passing slightly into Philadelphia. Let's go to Sunday now. The Sunday Week 7 card. Let's start top of the board. Cleveland, Cincinnati. Cleveland 3-point road favorites, 3.5 in some spots. The total 50.5 in this game, Battle of Ohio. And I believe this is one of the few times this season, in fact, it may be the first time all season, where we're having two teams that previously played against one another playing each other once again. So we're starting to get some of those divisional rematches taking place. We've got it with this game. I know the Bills and the Jets are playing each other. They have already played each other once this season. So you've got a couple division rematches going on here in this Week 7 slate. Now, they played earlier, and I was on Cincinnati in that game, and I am damn lucky. And anybody that was on the Bengals in that Thursday night game earlier this season against the Cleveland Browns, you have to consider yourself fortunate you cashed that ticket. They were outplayed. They couldn't stop Nick Chubb. They couldn't stop the ground game for the Browns, which just chewed up Cincinnati throughout that football game. But Cincinnati kept hanging around because every time their horrendous defense that night, and their defense was horrendous, and their defense still isn't very good. We saw the Indianapolis Colts come back last week to beat the Bengals. Hell, the Colts spotted the Bengals 21 points early in that game, and the Bengals defense still gave it up to a quarterback in Phillip Rivers that was coming off two back-to-back terrible performances, and he ends up lighting up the Cincinnati defense. So that's a concern for me. This Bengals defense is just not getting stops. It's not getting a consistent pass rush. I'm disappointed in that because they just recently got Geno Atkins back. That was supposed to help them along the defensive front. It hasn't necessarily played out that way so far for the Bengals. So it's been disappointing to see what we've gotten from their defense so far this season. But Joe Burrow, just continues to chuck the ball down the field, look to make plays to A.J. Green and Tyler Boyd and T. Higgins. And T. Higgins is a guy to watch out for. This guy is becoming more and more targeted. You talk about props, player props, and a guy that might have some value moving forward. Joe Burrow is finding chemistry in this receiving game right now with T. Higgins. And that's something I think you want to keep in mind because you're going to have to probably pay a little bit more in terms of receptions and receiving yards pricing on the likes of Green and Boyd. You may not have to, it's not going to be priced, I don't think, quite as much with Higgins. So that's something to keep an eye on here in this game. Joe Mixon is questionable at running back for the Bengals. We'll see if he's good to go for this game for Cincinnati. But there's a lot to like offensively with them, not so much defensively. And if you remember that first meeting in that Thursday night, if not for Joe Burrow just consistently rallying the team and getting them points after they gave up points, including the late backdoor touchdown, which got Cincinnati that point spread cover. But if you look at yards per play, if you look at total yards in that game, I mean, Cleveland dominated that game and yet only won by 5. So that's something you have to keep in mind, that's one of those classic instances where final score really isn't a true indicator of how the game actually played out. But if you're going to lay the 3.5 here with Cleveland, here's your problem. Baker Mayfield's ribs. That's the problem. And if you watch that game last week against Pittsburgh, albeit a much better defense from the Steelers than what he'd be up against here with Cincinnati, nevertheless, he didn't look right. He didn't look comfortable. He looked like he was in pain. And I don't know if it was just the Pittsburgh defense confused him, if he just had a bad game, or was he throwing those interceptions and making those mistakes and as inaccurate as he was throwing the football because those ribs were bothering him so much. It might have been a little bit of both. And that's the thing you're going to have to look out for here as we get toward Friday. The final injury reports come out. How healthy is Baker Mayfield right now? The betting markets don't seem to trust him to be healthy or play effectively because Cincinnati, has taken some money this week. Cleveland opened 4, down to 3 now, 3.5 in this game. This is a game I'm probably not going to bet because, to me, I thought it was a better number and better spot with Cincy last time. I mean, you look at the adjustment that's been made. Cincinnati was getting 7.5 points the first time around against Cleveland. Now they're only getting 3.5, albeit they're at home now. for this game. But there's been an adjustment here, and Cleveland, I think, has been adjusted a little bit after that blowout loss to Pittsburgh. Bounce back spot for them for sure. Cincinnati's defense, don't trust them. So it's a lot of things up in the air for me with this game. Really tough. For me, I'm not going to be involved in it significantly. I think if you got Cincinnati at 4, you have a decent bet. I'm probably more inclined to lay it with Cleveland, though, now that it's down to 3. But again, how healthy is Mayfield? What are we going to get from him? What are we going to get from in terms of his health going into this game? That's something that's I think a little bit up in the air. So we'll have to wait and see if he's healthy and how healthy he is going into this game on Sunday. Dallas and Washington. We've got the Washington football team. How about Dallas opening a 3-point road favorite? And it's now pick 'em across the board, 46.5 the total. Yeah, I like Washington here, and I know you're not getting the best of it. If you haven't bet it yet, you're not getting the best number. It's down to pick 'em because Washington was +3. It's pick 'em now. But there's nothing to like with Dallas. That was supposed to be a rally the troops, get everyone on the same page, rally around Andy Dalton spot on Monday Night Football for them against Arizona a few nights ago. And they couldn't have played worse, on either side of the football. They couldn't have played any worse. The offensive line is a complete disaster from an injury perspective right now. In fact, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, they currently don't have a single person who started on that offensive line last year for Dallas now available to them. When you talk about Zack Martin being out now, the latest casualty, he got injured Monday night. They were already without Tyron Smith. They were already without La'el Collins. Go on down the list of that offensive line. It's an infirmary. It is a MASH unit. And that offensive line, which was already sketchy when they had Zack Martin starting Monday night, then he comes out of the game, and it seems like it was just there was no chance for Andy Dalton. He was under consistent pressure. Now, he didn't play well either. I mean, he made some bad throws. He was inaccurate. I was expecting more out of him, and I was expecting more support from his teammates. It's just after beating the Giants, after going through the incredible, disappointment, I guess you could say, that Dak Prescott gets that season-ending ankle injury, but you get the win against the Giants. Andy Dalton comes, leads the team on a game-winning drive to put them in position for the game-winning field goal to beat the Giants in that game. You would think that's something to build on for the Dallas Cowboys going into Monday Night Football against Arizona. And instead, they lay an egg. And you could tell right away that as soon as they got backed up and Andy Dalton, almost threw an interception right on his own goal line. That's when I started to think, what, this ain't going to be Dallas's night. And sure enough, the Kyler Murray and Arizona takes advantage of 2 brutal Ezekiel Elliott fumbles. This guy has become completely useless since he got the big contract, Zeke Elliott. He's been an embarrassment, to be honest with you, with his play. Embarrassing. It's embarrassing that you get paid that much and you've made such little impact in 2 seasons with the Dallas Cowboys running the football. Really, I mean, has he really been that great of a running back these last couple of years since he got the big contract? It's not. He talks about, feed me, feed me, feed me. When you cough up the food, you don't deserve to be fed. And he coughed up the food twice in that game against the Arizona Cardinals, led directly to Arizona points. Dallas's offense then continued to be stuck in mud, couldn't get sustained first downs, couldn't keep drives alive, gave the ball back to Kyler Murray, and then right before half, the dagger touchdown, in my opinion, 80 yards to Christian Kirk. It was ball game over, 21-0, and that was it for Dallas. And now you're here in Dallas chirping publicly about the coaching staff. We're not properly prepared every week. They don't adjust on the fly. Could you imagine these comments becoming public for a guy that just got hired as head coach a few months ago? And they're already turning on Mike McCarthy a little bit. And look, Mike McCarthy is not the second coming of Vince Lombardi, or Bill Walsh, or Marv Levy, or any of the great head coaches we've seen in NFL history. I'm not going to make him out as one of those coaches. He's not. He has 1 Super Bowl to his name that he largely got because Aaron Rodgers was his quarterback, not because he was some coaching genius. Let's be truthful here. That's why he won that Super Bowl. However, it is not entirely fair for the players to be throwing all of these problems that the Dallas Cowboys have right now at the feet of Mike McCarthy. All right, we're not properly prepared. I'm hearing guys say from the Dallas Cowboys, that was the report that came out earlier this week. Well, what's it going to take for you to be properly prepared at this point? What's it going to take for Zeke Elliott, who's making a mountain of money, and DeMarcus Lawrence, who's also been handsomely paid the last couple of years, who, by the way, if you look up the box score for Arizona Dallas, and if you look for DeMarcus Lawrence's name on the list of defensive players and their statistics, you can't find his name. His name's not even listed. His name wasn't even on the box score for the Arizona-Dallas game Monday night. Do you know what that means? That means he did bupkis. That means he did absolutely nothing. He made no plays, none, zero on the defensive side of the football, and you're paying that guy a ton of money. He's supposed to be this elite pass rusher, great defensive end, the guy that can collapse the pocket. The only thing that's collapsing is his ability as a defensive football player. That's what's collapsing. That's about it. I mean, holy mackerel. They paid him a ton. Where is his impact plays? He has 1 sack on the season. 1. That's it. And again, go look at the box score. If you have the Score app or you have the ESP, whatever app you use, go to the box score of Arizona Dallas and look to see if you can find DeMarcus Lawrence's name in the player defensive statistics where they list tackles, solo tackles, assisted tackles, fumbles recovered, sacks, all of those statistics for defensive players. You don't even see Lawrence's name there because he did nothing. He did absolutely nothing in the game, and he's done absolutely nothing for a very long time now for the Dallas Cowboys. And you got to point the finger at the old man in the press box, old man Winter, Jerry Jones, who for some reason still believes he's got to be the judge and juror when it comes to player personnel decisions with this franchise. And we're seeing how that is working right now and doling out contracts that turn out to be big, epic flops in the end. And we start with Zeke Elliott and DeMarcus Lawrence at the top of that list. It's absolutely hilarious, really, to hear those guys and their teammates saying, we're not prepared. Well, apparently you weren't prepared under Jason Garrett either, because you played just as poorly last year under that guy. So what is it going to take, to properly pay you or to properly prepare? What is it going to take for these guys? They say we're not properly prepared. What's it going to take then? You want a little massage from some hot chick before the game, sit you down, do a little back rub or a massage. Is that going to get you properly prepared? What do you want, a steak and baked potato pregame meal or something? You want a nice little catered meal delivered to your locker room to get you going? What's it going to take? You say we're not properly prepared. What is it going to take? Because that's an excuse that doesn't hold water with me. Because if you say the coaches this year haven't had you properly prepared, what's the reason for you playing just this same way like a bunch of ass last year? What? That's 2 coaching staffs now then that you haven't been properly prepared because you're playing the same brutal way you did last year as far as I'm concerned. So there's issues right now with Dallas. And I haven't even gotten to their defense yet. Shredded again by Arizona. Can't stop the run. Their secondary is terrible. This secondary is horrible for the Dallas Cowboys. Now, they finally face a team that may not be able to take advantage of that secondary because Washington, when you look at skill position weapons, they don't have a ton outside of like Terry McLaurin's their big threat downfield for Kyle Allen. That's about it. Dontrell Inman, he played in the CFL. I know him very well. He played with the Argos, and then he went to the Chargers for a bit. He's a solid receiver. But other than that, Cam Sims had the big touchdown catch. Can he step up consistently for the Washington football team? That remains to be seen. But, that's the 2 guys I look at, Sims and Inman. They've got to step up. Can't always be Terry McLaurin. You've got to have other options that can take the defensive focus away from the number 1 receiver, in this case, McLaurin. The defense for Washington, though, their defensive front has playmakers on it. They get a pass rush. We know they drafted Chase Young. They made that unit better. And that's the matchup, I think, that could completely break the back of the Dallas Cowboys in this game. They've got a mangled offensive line. It's absolutely injury-riddled right now, beyond belief, with an immobile quarterback, Andy Dalton, under center. And the strength of Washington defensively is their front. They can get after the quarterback. They can get some pressure. They can rattle you, especially if you have a quarterback that's not really a dual threat, which Andy Dalton isn't. And you've got an offensive line that's not only not that great, but it's just injury plagued beyond belief right now. That's why I think Washington's probably going to win this game. And it's Dallas on a short week. Washington, again, these are two very, very weak teams in a bad division, but there's more things that point to, I think, Washington matching up better with Dallas in this game than vice versa. At Pick'em, I'm interested in Washington here in this game. It's going to be not a best bet for me, but it'll be a game. It's a bet. I already bet it at +1. It's Pick'em now. I still like it at Pick'em, obviously. I think they win the game. That's all they need to do. Dallas is just an absolute mess on the field. Off the field, you've got these secret snipers, these Dallas players sounding off about McCarthy and the coaching staff. You can't tell me that's a bet-on situation going into this game, not even close. So for me, it would be the Washington football team at Pick'em if I'm betting this game. Detroit, Atlanta. We've got Atlanta -2, 2.5 point home favorites, total 54-55 in this game. Detroit and Atlanta aren't good teams, but usually when you've got teams that are struggling, at some point they fold the tent and just, don't bring, and that's it. We realize we're not going anywhere. You see a half-hearted, half-assed effort on a weekly basis. I'm not convinced you're going to get that with either of these teams, and they kind of showed that last week. I mean, the Detroit Lions, they suffered an absolutely brutal loss, another blown lead against New Orleans, and what they ended up doing was coming back against the Jacksonville Jaguars last week, and they dominated the Jaguars en route to a very comfortable victory against Jacksonville. And believe it or not, I can't believe I'm saying this, I laid points on the road with Detroit last week. It's probably one of the few times I've ever done it. That tells you what I think of Jacksonville right now. That team has fallen completely off a cliff, but let's give the Lions a little bit of credit, and let's even give that slob, Matt Patricia, a little credit, because for all the rumblings that players and Matt Patricia aren't exactly having kumbaya moments behind the scenes, the fact that they bounced back from losing to New Orleans, came back against Jacksonville and played well, you got to give them credit for that. And maybe it's a sign this team's not going to pack it in here on the season. And you could say the same thing about Atlanta. They fired Dan Quinn. They fired the general manager, Thomas Dimitrov, a couple weeks ago. First game with Raheem Morris now taking over in the interim head coaching spot. And yeah, some of it last week was just Minnesota can't get out of their own way. And when Kirk Cousins is going to spot you 3 interceptions in the first half, you're clearly not going to win the game. I think that's also a big part of it with what we saw out of Atlanta last week. But at the same time, you got effort, you got passion, you got energy out of Atlanta, and you weren't really sure you were going to get that for a winless team after their coach got fired the week before. But you got it from Atlanta. It was probably the best game Matt Ryan's played this season, throwing the football for the Falcons. He lit up that Minnesota team. And we know Detroit's not exactly a shutdown defense. So there's definitely some things you got to like here about Atlanta and, quite honestly, Detroit with the way they play. These are two teams that have a long way to go to come back and make something of this season, which, probably isn't going to happen. But you didn't see Detroit roll over. You saw energy, you saw an effort, you saw a good performance last week, albeit against a bad team. And the same thing with Atlanta. You saw a good performance, you saw energy, albeit I think we have to call Minnesota now a bad football team. I mean, it's time we stop thinking of Minnesota as this consistent perennial playoff team that they've been the last few years. I don't think they're anywhere close to being that team right now. So this is a long way of me saying that I think it's a difficult game from a side perspective to bet here, Detroit, Atlanta. I would lean Atlanta at below a field goal, but I'll give Detroit credit for showing me that they played and one of their best defensive games of the year last week as well against the Jacksonville Jaguars. More than anything, this is a high total, but Detroit's defense is, I know they shut down Jacksonville last week, but you put them up against any capable offense, they're going to give up points. And I'll say this about Detroit's offense. When it's fully healthy, and they've got now pretty much everybody in their skill position group back, almost, although Marvin Jones, Danny Amendola questionable, but they got Golladay back. DeAndre Swift had a huge game against Jacksonville last week. The rookie running back certainly is getting more and more emphasis from this Lions offense. TJ Hawkinson's been great at tight end. And it's not like Atlanta's capable of shutting down a lot of teams. Their defense is still very, very much a suspect right now. This game definitely should have some points in it. It's a very, very high total. And the one concern is we're seeing these totals that have been inflated now for a couple weeks. We're seeing the worm turn a little bit. Remember, the first 4 or 5 weeks of the season, we went 5 weeks straight to begin the season where there were more overs cashing than unders. But finally, last week, week 6, we had more unders than overs, and it was by a large margin. The unders definitely dominated the NFL last week. Let me see if I can bring up the actual numbers here for NFL last week in terms of totals. Let me just see here. NFL, can I find it here? All right, let's see. NFL. No, actually, I don't have it here, but there were more unders than overs last week by a pretty sizable margin. And that's a product of the fact that every week that's gone by, the average total has gotten higher on these games. The average total's been in the 50s now for the last couple of weeks. So now and plus now the defenses are starting to get more comfortable. Early in the season, there wasn't much open field tackling because there wasn't a large training camp and a bigger number of practices and no preseason games, which I really think was a detriment to just those defensive fundamentals earlier in the season of open field tackling, wrapping up in the open field. All of that stuff, I think, suffered early in the season. So putting all those factors together, and that's why you're starting to see the unders come in a little bit more. That being said, this is one game I will not bet under. It makes sense to me that we should see both of these offenses, the Lions and Falcons, have success. I lean over the total with this one. Detroit taking on Atlanta. Next game, Carolina, New Orleans. New Orleans 7.5 point home favorites, total 51 in this game. Saints off a bye, but Saints are one of those teams under Sean Payton, believe it or not. Their record off a bye has not been great. They're one of those teams that's actually kind of struggled over the years coming off a bye. There you go. Thank you to Gerald Jones. Yeah, 10 unders, 4 overs last week. I knew it was pretty significant. Like, it wasn't just finally there were more unders than overs and it was like 7-6 or 8-7. It was 10-4, unders last week in the NFL. So keep that in mind. You got to pick your spots more if you like overs. And as someone that's predominantly an over bettor, I'm realizing that you got to be careful, pick your spots a little bit more carefully when it comes to betting overs right now. New Orleans off the bye. Before that, they beat the Chargers. Remember that come from behind win against the LA Chargers on Monday Night Football, but they didn't cover as home favorites. That game went to overtime. If you look at the Saints, by the way, as home favorites the last few years, it's been a terrible point spread rule for them, and it continues to be. I mean, this team is struggling to cover numbers as home favorites. They lost outright as home favorites to Green Bay. They didn't cover as home favorites against the LA Chargers. Really, their only point spread cover was at home was way back against Tampa Bay in Week 1, and it's been a rarity for the New Orleans Saints to be this great home favorite. There are things I like about Carolina going into this game. I know they had a bad game last week against Chicago. It snapped a 3-game win streak for them. Teddy Bridgewater wasn't sharp. The pass rush for Chicago really got home and won the battle in the trenches against the Carolina offensive line. But I think Carolina can shore that up. I trust this coaching staff, believe it or not. Even though he's a rookie, Matt Rule has proven to be a winner at Temple, a winner at Baylor in college. What he's done already with Carolina in just a month and a half is remarkable, considering all the personnel changes on the field with player personnel changes, considering a new coach, new coordinators, new system and scheme on both sides of the ball, a new quarterback in Teddy Bridgewater. For Carolina to be where they are right now, that's impressive, to me, to be in the mix in this division. And I like this spot. I think it's a bet-on spot for Carolina. The team that wins in that dramatic comeback fashion, like New Orleans did before the bye and then has the bye, I worry about them not bringing their A game coming off the bye. When I back a team off a bye, I would actually rather have the team that was struggling and not playing well going into the bye week, because often that's a recharge of the batteries. They hit the reset button. Whereas if you're coming off a really good run going into the bye and a win like the Saints had, sometimes you're hearing how good you are. You don't really prepare quite as well coming off the bye, and you end up playing a little bit you're off your game, and you're a little bit flat in the game itself. That could happen here for the Saints, kind of like what happened with Green Bay. Green Bay, everybody was talking about how great this team is. Aaron Rodgers looks great. The defense even looks better. And Tampa Bay just completely brought them back down to earth Sunday with the Packers coming off their bye week. I'm not saying that happens here for New Orleans, and there's a couple other elements that make sense here for Carolina. Joe Brady is the offensive coordinator for the Panthers. Matt Rule hired him. He was at LSU with Joe Burrow last year on that national championship team. But before that, before he got the LSU job, Joe Brady was under Sean Payton in New Orleans on this offensive coaching staff for the Saints. So Joe Brady, the offensive coordinator for Carolina, knows that New Orleans offense very well. And they haven't changed a lot of the terminology since he left New Orleans. He now is on Carolina's coaching staff. That's a benefit. Teddy Bridgewater, former Saint, going back to New Orleans to play the team that he led to a 5-0 record, straight up and against the spread last year in the 5 starts he made in place of Drew Brees when Brees was injured. Who knows that Saints defense very well? Teddy Bridgewater does. He played there. Same defensive coordinator, Dennis Allen, when Teddy Bridgewater was there. Those are little edges to me that add up to Carolina. I think this is a close game. I think they've taken New Orleans down to the wire. The Saints are having a difficult time winning any games by margin right now. I like Carolina here, plus 7.5. You can get that at a lot of places. This is actually one of my favorite plays this week here in week 7. Carolina getting the underdog price here. The over also is in play. The Saints defense has been not just a little bit they haven't just underachieved a little bit. They've underachieved a lot. They have not been anywhere close to the defense I thought we were going to get from the Saints this year. The back door is always open. I don't even know if it gets to the point where Carolina needs a backdoor score to cover this number. I think they got a chance to threaten to win outright. Give me Carolina here. Good spot off the loss against Chicago. They've still been rarely blown out this year. And I'm impressed with Matt Rule and what he's done. And I think Teddy Bridgewater is certainly going to be amped up going back to New Orleans to play his former team, the Saints. So give me Carolina here in this one. Jansen, last I heard is that Michael Thomas had a setback. That's a great question asked by Jansen in our chat. He had a setback with his injury that was just reported this morning. I saw that come across the wire with his ankle and hamstring injury. So the fact that, on Thursday now he had a setback and he didn't practice today. He was practicing as a limited participant yesterday in practice for the Saints, but today he was back to not participating in practice, which indicates that it could be a little bit of a setback here with Michael Thomas. And he's far from a certainty or far from a sure thing right now, being able to play on Sunday. And obviously we know how important he is to Drew Brees in that passing game because, when you look at without Thomas, Emmanuel Sanders has finally gotten it going, but Traquan Smith's been up and down, and really nobody else has been consistent in terms of a consistent, reliable go-to guy for Drew Brees throwing the football. So other than Kamara, who has almost become like a second or third receiver because they throw to him so much, and he's such a capable pass catcher out of the backfield. But nevertheless, it's been an impact not having Thomas, and now it's concerning that he didn't practice today, that maybe his status isn't so sure anymore for playing on Sunday. Buffalo, New York Jets. We've got the Bills, struggling Bills, 12.5. Road favorites, 44.5, 45 the total. But if any team can cure what ails you, it's the New York Jets. Absolutely hideous. I'm stunned we still have seen no movement on Adam Gase. I honestly think he's probably going to finish the season at this point. They've had so many opportunities to say, you know what, out you go, and that's it. We can't take this anymore. They had no energy behind them last week, the New York Jets, and that shutout loss to Miami. It's pretty difficult to be shut out by the Miami Dolphins, but that's exactly what happened to the New York Jets last week. Terrible body language. There was no life in that sideline. Joe Flacco was absolutely horrendous at quarterback. It'll be interesting to see. Sam Darnold was practicing yesterday. Is he good to go? Is he coming back for this game? There has been a little money moved toward the Jets. So the fact that he was practicing yesterday, Adam Gase said he was looking pretty good. He feels good coming into practice. So he looks like he's on the right path to returning as starting quarterback for the New York Jets here, Sam Darnold. But, that being said, is it really going to make a difference? Like, the Jets' offensive line is terrible. Other than Jamison Crowder and Perriman at times steps up at receiver, other than that, I don't see a lot that I love with the Jets. It's not like they were lighting up the scoreboard with Sam Darnold, but with Flacco, it was even worse. Like, there is no doubt Darnold is better than Flacco, and at least the Jets are a better team with Darnold than Flacco. How much better? Maybe not much better, because they're just such a mess everywhere. The defense can't get any stops. Defense can't get any pass rush. But even if Darnold plays, you got to believe the Bills have a chance and are not going to look past the Jets. And Josh Allen said, I have to be better. I can't play that way like he did against Kansas City. I think there's more blame than just him. Remember, he carried the Bills to the 4 wins earlier in the season when the defense wasn't playing well, and that defense still isn't playing well. It was kind of like Green Bay, San Francisco in the playoffs last year, watching Kansas City versus Buffalo on Monday. They're running the football. Clyde Edwards-Helaire is getting the ball throughout that game because they've committed to it. It's working. It's coming, and you still can't stop it. It reminded me exactly of what I saw with the Packers 49ers in the playoffs last year, where Packers knew the 49ers were running the football on every play, and they still couldn't stop it. That's exactly what we saw with the Bills and the Chiefs on Monday. And to me, it's a head scratcher that this Bills defense has gone from the group they've been the last 2 seasons to this group this year that has not gotten a consistent pass rush, that even the secondary has not been the lockdown group. Tre'Davious White has still been pretty good, but hasn't had a lot of help at the other side of the field around him. Nevertheless, the Bills have got the right team at the right time probably to wake up and get back on track here. According to a lot of books right now, there's around 6.5, 7 as the number right now. It's mostly 7 with Buffalo in the first half for this game. That's a bet that I like because I think you're going to get Buffalo's best early in the game coming off the 2 straight losses. There's urgency to be ready to go and be good early on. We saw the Jets in the first half last week. If you had Miami first half last week against the Jets, that was about as easy as it got. They were behind early in this game. I'm definitely interested in Buffalo first half, -7. I don't know if I love the full game, 12.5, but there is nothing that can get me at all to back the New York Jets right now. Talking about a winless team going absolutely nowhere, a bad defense, an offense that even with Darnold back, lacks playmakers, a Buffalo team that I don't think is going to look past the Jets here one bit. I just like the first half even more than the full game. If you like -12, I'm not talking you out of it. It would be a lean to the Bills as well in the full game. But I think the first half, getting that focus, we got to vent our frustration. We got to pick on somebody after losing these back-to-back games to Tennessee and Kansas City. And I think the Bills have the ideal team to do it. And look, they need more out of Mario Addison and Jerry Hughes and all of these pass rushers. AJ Epinesa, where are these guys? Ed Oliver, where are you guys? All right, where is that pass rush? It hasn't been there the last few weeks. Now you're playing better teams. You were playing better quarterbacks. Now you're playing the Jets, who have had offensive line problems all year. This has to be a this has to be a game where the Bills pass rush comes to life. And if it doesn't, and Darnold and the Jets have all day to throw the football, then I'm hitting the panic button a little bit about this Buffalo defense. Jets team total under, Colorado Bull saying he's interested in that. Yes, absolutely. I mean, Jets didn't score a point last week against Miami. Albeit the Bills defense is disappointed this year, there's a very good chance that you won't see the Jets be able to score. It's 16.5 right now, by the way, the team total on the New York Jets. Do you see them getting more than 2 touchdowns if they get that? I don't think so. So I would definitely not talk anybody out of Jets team total under. That definitely makes some sense. Buffalo, again, defensively, they've underachieved, but if they're going to have a game where they pop back up and play well, it's got to be this opponent this week off 2 straight losses. Green Bay, Houston, Green Bay 3.5-point favorites, 57 the total in this game. Where's Houston's mindset at, after last week? I mean, Deshaun Watson played a hell of a game. And one thing the Texans have found the last couple of weeks is that their offense is still very capable. I know everyone made a huge deal about the DeAndre Hopkins trade in the offseason, and rightfully so, but these last couple of weeks, Can you imagine that Houston's offense has looked so good the last couple of weeks against Jacksonville and Tennessee, the first two games after they got rid of Bill O'Brien, and yet with Bill O'Brien, the offense looked completely out of sync, and he's supposed to be this great offensive coach. That tells you all you need to know right there about Bill O'Brien. They've had arguably their two best offensive games of the season right here after they got rid of Bill O'Brien, but that's what's happened. Will Fuller, Brandon Cooks, Randall Cobb, Kenny Stills. It's actually a really solid receiving corps for the Texans, but the way they lost last week against Tennessee, where they come back from an early deficit, they take the lead, and then only to give it back up. Derrick Henry with the touchdown run. They take the lead back again. And then the Derrick Henry touchdown run, and then they score to go up by 6. Romeo Crennel decides to go for 2 when they're up. When he's go for 2 up by 7, I should say. They don't get it. A lot of people on Romeo Crennel's case for going for 2 when he was up by 7. Here's why I'm not going to give him that big of a, critique for doing that. His defense wasn't stopping Tennessee, and I think he knew it. When you're up by 7 and you go for 2, you get it. You're up by 9, the game's pretty much over. Unless Tennessee's going to recover an onside kick, you're going to win that game. And he knew it. His defense wasn't going to stop Ryan Tannehill when they got the ball back. We could see it. They weren't stopping the Titans at all in that game. Henry was going off 200 yards rushing. Tannehill was making plays to Jonnu Smith and Verkser and A.J. Brown and company in the receiving game, and the Houston Texans weren't stopping it. That is why he went for 2. He wanted to end the game right there. He wanted his offense to end the game because he didn't trust his defense to end the game. And sure enough, Titans right down the field, score the touchdown to tie the game, force overtime. And then, of course, Houston's defense, another chance to get a stop when Tennessee gets the ball to start overtime, and they can't get the stop. Tennessee right down the field in the blink of an eye, and they win that game in overtime. Tough beat if you had Houston plus the points last week, to be sure. Just that kind of loss. It's a tough one. You've seen the energy. You've seen the effort from Houston the 2 games since Bill O'Brien's been there. Maybe you see it again here, but when you lose a game that way in the division, now you're 1-5, I worry that maybe Houston's whatever last bit of energy and emotion they had just evaporated after losing that game last week in such awful fashion. Green Bay, we know their track record with Aaron Rodgers off a loss is good. It's 29-19 against the spread for the Packers off a loss. You would expect this to be a bounce back spot for Green Bay. I lean Green Bay. I think I like this total over more because I do think Houston offensively, can do damage against Green Bay. I don't love the Packer defense, and we finally saw Green Bay's defense look a little human last week. They played a lot of weak teams early in the season, and now you're starting to play some better quarterbacks. It's a high number here, but 31-28 gets you paid. All right, 31-28 cashes an over, 34-31, 35-31, 35-28. Any of those score combinations get you up and over the total. And I could see this game getting to one of those final scores. I mean, I think both of these teams offensively going to have a very strong day. Houston's defense, again, is just really struggling right now. I know they did pretty well against Jacksonville, but against any sort of good offense, Pittsburgh, Kansas City, Baltimore, Tennessee last week, Houston's defense hasn't stopped anything. And now they got to face Aaron Rodgers, one of the better quarterbacks in the NFL. So to me, this game goes over the total, and I lean a little bit to Green Bay. But I'm higher on the Texans than a lot of people because I've backed Houston twice now since the coaching change. And my thought process was just ride the Houston Texans week in and week out. But I don't love the fact I don't love the fact of riding them here this week against the Green Bay Packers off the loss they had last week. It was a stinging loss, and I worry that maybe they're just not completely back on track and ready to go for this game against Houston. All right, next game on the NFL card. We thank you to everyone, by the way, for tuning in here and watching the show live. It's Ian Cameron's Football Frenzy right here on the Pub Sports Radio YouTube channel. So thank you guys for tuning in. Let me just get my place back where we are. Seattle, Arizona. Seattle 3.5 point favorites, 56 the total. This is another game where Seattle Unders with Seattle are not of interest to me. Let's put it that way right now. Arizona, give them credit. It was a great performance for them against Dallas last week, but was just every bit as much a horrible Dallas performance as it was a good one from Arizona. We'll have to see how they fare here. Seahawks come into this game 5-0, feeling good, off a bye week. They've been in a lot of close games, but with Kyler Murray and Christian Kirk and DeAndre Hopkins and Andy Isabella and a good amount of weapons for this Arizona team, that's going to test Seattle here in this game. So from a side perspective, I'm not going to be involved. Seattle, when they're laying 6 or more, I'm interested betting against Seattle in those spots because their defense is just not very good. And it's been even worse since Jamal Adams went down due to injury. They're not getting any sort of pass rush. The secondary can be absolutely shredded apart by any capable quarterback. And Kyler Murray's a capable quarterback. So to me, look, Arizona on a short week's a concern. Definitely. I get that. Seattle off the bye. Again, though, rolling going into the bye week, I can understand why Arizona got bet here. Those aren't great spots. You look back historically, the last several years in the NFL, you look back every time a team got off to a tremendous undefeated start early in the season, had a bye week, came out of their bye week, they played poorly more than they played well, more often than not in those spots. Look at Green Bay. Again, I go back to Green Bay last week against Tampa Bay, off the bye week, undefeated. And they finally lose their first game. I'm not saying Seattle's losing here, but it's a spot. I've seen this. I'm someone that's now been betting NFL for over a decade. I've seen how this league works and these little nuances that often come out and come to fruition. And one of them is the team that's playing great, feeling good about themselves, reading their press clippings, hearing everybody gush about how good they are early in the season, undefeated. Then they have the bye, and then wham, they have that wake-up call in the game off a bye. They're flat, they're sloppy, they're taking bad penalties, they're turning the ball over, they're just making mistakes. I'm not saying that is going to happen for Seattle, but I worry this is a game where they don't have their A game. That's a concern here for me. But I was also hoping for more than 3.5 to bet Arizona, and I'm not getting that. So I'm not getting the number I wanted in this game, but I'm worried about this spot a little bit for Seattle. I am. Because I've seen this movie play out many times in the NFL over the years. Undefeated team going into a bye week, and then out of the bye week, they just lay an egg, just a stinker, a clunker. And we saw it with Green Bay. We've seen it multiple times. That's a concern for me. Enough of a concern where I don't want Seattle here, be Arizona or pass for me. But again, Seattle's in that price range where they can find a way with a Russell Wilson drive in the last minute, which he's done so many times to win the game and maybe win by 3 or 4 points and either push or cover the number where it is right now. And like I say, if I wanted Arizona, I would have wanted more points than just 3.5. I'd want 6 or more. But Seattle, they've found ways to win, but this spot scares me a little bit for them going into this one. But we know Russell Wilson's been great and is always capable no matter what situation. I mean, let's be honest. They got outplayed by Minnesota the game before their bye week on Sunday Night Football. And if Minnesota, finishes, gets a first down with the final time they had the ball and has a chance to put it away, then Seattle doesn't have that chance to go down the field and win the game, which they ended up doing. So, again, Seattle's been a little bit fortuitous to get to undefeated. I don't love the spot for them. I lean Arizona, but boy, I'm not getting enough points. And I also lean over the total because I trust these offenses more than I trust the two defenses. Okay, Arizona shut down Dallas. Let's not forget they're still without Chandler Jones. And being able to get a pass rush on an immobile Andy Dalton and getting a pass rush on Russell Wilson, who can escape as good or better than anybody, is a big difference, a huge difference for this Arizona defense in terms of facing Dallas on Monday and now facing Seattle here. San Francisco, New England. Look at the money on San Francisco. They actually opened New England 5.5-point home favorites. They're down to -2 pretty much across the board. 43.5 the total in this game. I don't know what to make of San Francisco. San Francisco's getting healthier. There's no question. Jimmy Garoppolo's back. He was decent, I guess you could say, against the Rams. They ran the football well. They have George Kittle back. The offensive line's getting healthier. The defense, starting to get a little healthier as well. Some of those massive injuries they had earlier in the season, they're starting to heal up a bit going into this game, San Francisco. And We'll have to wait and see if they're able to get Richard Sherman back. I mean, there's been talk that he's been close, but not quite. Raheem Mostert is doubtful. Jansen, he's not going to play, but I don't worry about that too much. Jerick McKinnon is more than capable. He's a solid running back. He's been in the league a long time now. So they'll miss Mostert for sure. He's probably the best they've got, and don't forget Tevin Coleman's also been out for a while now. He's still on IR, but Jerick McKinnon's capable. I mean, I don't think that's as huge a loss as other people would think, because they've got a great deal of depth at running back, the 49ers. But it's good to see this receiving core get healthier. Dante Pettis is healthy, Trent Taylor, Kendrick Bourne, Brandon Ayuk, and he's looking like a good draft pick. Brandon Ayuk's really played well the last couple of weeks. Deebo Samuel as well, which has been huge having him back. So this San Francisco team offensively getting healthier, aside from the recent Mostert injury. That's good news. Look, this is Belichick off a loss, and from a spot perspective, there's no doubt this is a New England spot. All right, they're off a home loss against the Denver Broncos as more than touchdown favorites. They're very good off a loss. They have been under Bill Belichick for years. It's a New England spot. And San Francisco off a huge divisional win on Sunday Night Football, now traveling coast to coast. There's no question. It's a good spot for New England. But have you seen this New England offensive line and the injury report? It's ugly. It is just as bad as Dallas, in my opinion, as the offensive line injuries they have right now. Just a mash unit along the offensive line. And we saw that offensive line that is banged up and struggling right now big time against Denver. Cam Newton didn't have time. Receivers didn't get separation. That's another thing about New England. They don't have receivers that can get separation from the secondary. That's an issue. This is not a team that's littered with burners at wide receiver, guys that have great blazing speed that can garner separation from one-on-one coverage down the field. N'Keal Harry's not that guy. Damiere Byrd is got decent speed, but not great, and he's undersized. Then you've got Gunnar Olszewski, Jacoby Myers. Julian Edelman is a shell of what he used to be. I don't know if it's a product of not having Tom Brady around anymore, or if it's just the way they've tailored the offense more toward option football and let Cam Newton sort of run the ball a lot. It's not really getting him in any sort of rhythm. There's all kinds of things that could explain why New England's offense doesn't look great the last couple of weeks. It's a banged up offensive line. It's trying to tailor the offense more to a read pass option type offense for Cam Newton. It's, Julian Edelman's supposed to be your go-to guy, and he really hasn't played like it so far this season. And then you've got a bunch of other receivers that just don't have that blazing speed. And when you have number one, number two receivers, you like them to be fast enough to be able to pull away from opposing defensive backs. New England doesn't have those kind of receivers. And San Francisco's still got a pretty capable defense. So from a matchup perspective, I think it's advantage San Francisco. But the spot is so dubious, and New England is now so cheap, 1.5, 2-point home favorites, that I've got a clash of thought process here in this game, which probably means I'm not betting this game, at least not from a side perspective. I do like the under in this game. It's already been bet 45.5 to 44, 43.5 now showing up. I think it's the correct move. San Francisco, I don't think they're going to light things up on the road here against the New England defense, which is probably still the strength of this team right now. And on the flip side, I think New England's offense has got a world of problems right now. Cam Newton didn't look right in his first game coming off his COVID-19 situation. A New England team that's got offensive line injuries, and a New England team that doesn't have skill position talent that scares an opposing defense. They lack the receivers again to break away from one-on-one coverage. This has one of those slow, plodding, methodical 21-17, 21-20 type of games written all over it that stays under the total. So again, I'm not the biggest under guy in the world. Anybody that knows me as a bettor knows that. But this under definitely stands out to me, that this will be probably a little bit of a lower scoring game between these two teams. Kansas City, Denver. We've got Kansas City 9.5-point road favorites in the Mile High City, 45.5, 46 the total in this game. This is a fascinating one because the under's gone down 3 points, 3.5-point move toward the under, and it's all weather related. Wind and a foot of snow in the forecast for Denver on Sunday. So this could be a little bit of a regular season snow game or snow bowl between the Chiefs and the Broncos on Sunday. That is the main reason why we've seen this total take all kinds of money downward and look toward the under. And again, it's hard to argue with it. If it was just snow, then I could make a case that they're betting this under too heavily. But the fact that now there's going to be potential wind involved with this game in Denver on Sunday, that's the thing that concerns me. And I'll always say this: never mind rain, never mind snow, wind, wind, wind. That is the single biggest weather element that can keep a game under the total. It is a much stronger factor to keeping a game under the total than rain or snow is. It's wind. So when you get these instances where wind looks like it could be a factor, that's what concerns me more about the game going over the total than anything. And Kansas City, was perfectly content last week against Buffalo, maybe because it worked. They outgained the Bills 466 to 206. Like, such an impressive dominating effort for the Kansas City Chiefs. And it was all on the ground. I've never seen Kansas City, control a game, dominate a game, and yet Patrick Mahomes have such little impact on that result. He didn't have to do much. He didn't have to do anything against the Bills because they were just running the football so well throughout that game with Clyde Edwards-Helaire. And if the weather's going to be inclement, which it looks like it's going to be on Sunday in Denver, I don't expect Big Red, Andy Reid, and Eric Bieniemy, the offensive coordinator, who, by the way, is going to be one of the first guys hired for one of these head coaching vacancies that are open. Atlanta needs a new head coach. Houston needs a new head coach. The New York Jets are going to need a new head coach after the season. Eric Bieniemy's got to be on the short list for a lot of these coaching jobs. He's done a great job. He's done a phenomenal bit of work with this team as offensive coordinator of the Chiefs, and his next coaching opportunity is right around the corner in my mind. We'll have to see how it goes here. Denver won against New England last week, but they won because of the defense, and they took advantage of Cam Newton was out of sync, hadn't practiced, had COVID. The offensive line was injury riddled for New England. Denver took advantage of that, but their offense, Drew Lock and company, was not very good in the game. They won in spite of their offense. They really didn't get much going. That's definitely a concern for them, because if by chance Kansas City, gets up by a touchdown, gets up by 2 touchdowns, are they really a team that has backdoor potential? And Kansas City defense plays like they did against Buffalo. It's going to be difficult for Denver to get that backdoor touchdown. It's not a great Kansas City spot. That is the one issue. You've got Denver, and Denver's defense has been solid. The weather's not going to be great. The Chiefs, by the way, against Denver, 9-0 straight up, 7-1-1 against the spread the last 9 meetings against the Broncos. They've owned this team. They've dominated this team. They've covered almost every recent meeting between the Chiefs and the Broncos, these division rivals. Kansas City's consistently gotten the better of it. But you got to lay 9.5 in a short week for Kansas City after playing Buffalo on a Monday, and now you're going to Denver. Tricky spot for Kansas City, but I'm not in a rush to bet against Kansas City. We're talking about, I think, with the Las Vegas loss a couple weeks ago, that was the only straight-up loss for Kansas City in their last 15 games. They are 14-1 straight up, and I believe 13-2 against the spread in their last 15 games going back to last year, which is remarkable. It's insane. This is the defending Super Bowl champions, the reigning MVP Patrick Mahomes. Every public Joe knows how good this team is and probably wants to back them every week, and yet they've maintained and retained point spread value week in and week out. They've gone 13-2 in their last 15 ATS, this Kansas City team. That's an unbelievable run for as popular and as everybody knows they're an elite team. You're not hiding anything. This is not supposed to be a situation and a team with point spread value. They're supposed to be overvalued. They're supposed to be a team struggling to cover point spreads. They're not that team, Kansas City. They find ways to cover these numbers. They're a difficult team for me to bet week in and week out because you keep saying to yourself, man, that's a lot of points, and then it ends up not being a lot, as evidenced by the fact they've covered 13 of their last 15. Nevertheless, Denver's defense, I do respect the way they've played the last couple weeks enough. It's not a great scheduling spot for Kansas City, Monday to Sunday, now in the altitude of Denver. but I'm not going against Kansas City here. And again, I keep thinking Denver can hang around, keep this game close, keep it close, and then Kansas City fourth quarter, they go up by 10 or they go up by 14, and as Drew Lock and that offense in bad weather got that backdoor score in them, their offense didn't look good at all last week against New England. That's enough of a concern for me where I am not interested in getting on this Denver side, even though it's probably a better spot for the Broncos than it is for the Chiefs in this game. Jansen saying the under, yeah, but unfortunately it's now 46, 45 and a half. It's already gone down a lot. So you've lost some value, but again, with the weather concerns in mind, that's what's caused that movement downward in the total. Tampa Bay lost. Actually, you know what? That's the Sunday night game. So we'll do that after. Let's do Pittsburgh, Tennessee. We've got Tennessee, 1-point favorite, 50 and a half the total in this game between these two teams. Tennessee's slight favorites. I believe that's the updated line. Let me just double check on that because, Tennessee right now is 1-point favorite, 50 and a half the total. There's definitely some injury. Pittsburgh's offensive line's got issues right now. David DeCastro didn't play last week. There's a couple other starters on the O-line that are questionable to play in this huge battle of undefeated teams, Steelers and Titans. There's concerns right now for the Steelers going into this game. No question about that. However, all that being said, it's like Pittsburgh's offensive line's a little bit compromised, a little bit banged up going into this game. But Tennessee's defense is not exactly a shutdown defense, not one bit right now. And Ben Roethlisberger, even with that offensive line, I thought they and those offensive line injuries, and he lost an O-lineman last week as well against Cleveland. They still moved the ball. They still put up points. Chase Claypool and Juju Smith-Schuster and James Washington are proven to be a nice little trio at receiver. James Conner ran the football effectively last week. So Pittsburgh probably can still have some success offensively just because I haven't been impressed with Tennessee's defense. I have been impressed with their offense. I mean, Ryan Tannehill, and I don't think I'm going nuts saying this, he's playing like an elite quarterback right now. In fact, he played like an elite quarterback last year for Tennessee ever since he took over from Marcus Mariota, who got benched. You look at the numbers. Ryan Tannehill's been that good. And Derrick Henry, 200 yards rushing last week in the win against Houston. That was a big part of the story as well. I get it. But Ryan Tannehill, in terms of throwing the football, he's been pinpoint accurate. He's been fitting these throws into these tight windows and been right, razor sharp in terms of accuracy. He's putting the ball right where the hands of his receivers are in these tight windows, and he's doing it every week. He deserves a lot of credit. He deserves to be talked about as probably a top 5 quarter this season. I'm not talking about going back here. I'm talking about your performance in this season alone. Ryan Tannehill's a top 5 quarterback in the NFL this season with the way he has played. There is no question about that. He's finding his receivers. And now this Ryan Tannehill passing attack is even stronger since the Titans got A.J. Brown back from injury the last couple weeks to go with Jonnu Smith, a great tight end. There's all kinds of weapons here. Adam Humphries has been good for the Tennessee Titans at receiver. Corey Davis, they get him back. Look out for Tennessee. I mean, they can run it with Henry. They've got Brown, Davis, and Humphries to throw the football to. Jonnu Smith, a good tight end, and even the backup tight end, Anthony Ferkser. He's pretty capable. He can play. I mean, there's just a lot of weapons on Tennessee. They're in great form. Pittsburgh's defense is good, really, really good. This is the best offense I think they've played. I think this offense might even be better than Cleveland's. And going into last week, Cleveland, my concern was Pittsburgh played the Giants and Daniel Jones. They played Houston and Deshaun Watson, but back when Houston was a mess and O'Brien was there and the team was kind of tuning him out and not playing well, there were a lot of weak offenses. Denver with Jeff Driscoll that day at quarterback. Pittsburgh faced them. A lot of weaker offenses and weaker quarterbacks early in the season. So that was why going into last week, and I lost with the over in the Cleveland-Pittsburgh game, thinking Cleveland's the best offense they played. But Steelers proved me wrong. They had Cleveland bottled up that whole game. Maybe the rib injury of Baker Mayfield came into play a little bit. But you can't take anything away from the Steeler defense. They were outstanding last week against Cleveland. But this will be another good test for them. Tennessee's offense looks elite. And from a totals perspective, it's difficult. Pittsburgh is not a fast-paced team. In fact, they always seem to run the play clock down to 5 seconds or less between plays. He's been absolutely outstanding. They've been very, very slow paced, I should say. They don't move fast. That's the concern here with the total being in the 50s in this game. Nevertheless, you're not going to see me betting Tennessee under. If you go back and look at Tennessee's game log, going back to the very first start of Tannehill replacing Mariota last year, you will find a Tennessee team that I believe has had their games go over the total in all but 2 or 3 games since Tannehill's been the starter. They've been an over machine. Their totals are finally getting adjusted, and now they're a team that seems to be lined in the 50s every week when it comes to their totals. But you won't see me betting a Tennessee under. No way. No how right now with this Titans team. I was on the over with Tennessee and Houston last week. I was on a lot of overs with Tennessee last year when Tannehill took over at quarterback. I just will not bet this team under the total right now. The defense is a little bit shaky, but their offense can flat out get it done and move the football. They've shown that ever since Tannehill took over. As far as the side is concerned here, I think Pittsburgh's got – I'm interested in the better defense at a pick-em price, and that's the Steelers. I lean to Pittsburgh here. But now that's a couple of times I've gone against Tennessee and lost. And I'm not anxious to try to bet against Tennessee once again. I'm not anxious to do it. I mean, I gave them a ton of credit and Mike Vrabel, the head coach, a ton of credit. How have they done this? They didn't practice. They practiced twice in 16 days going into the Buffalo game. They were supposed to be rusty as hell, and they beat a really good Bills team. They're on a very short week, Tuesday to Sunday. Think about that, 5 days between games, and they just keep on battling. It wasn't pretty. Their defense got ripped apart a little bit by Watson, but they find a way in a brutal spot to come back and beat Houston last week. You've got to give Mike Vrabel and the Titans credit. They've done a great job. Again, but Tennessee's been an over machine. I know Pittsburgh plays slow. They've got a good defense, but I'm not betting Tennessee under. Not until I see signs that they go under the total multiple games in a row, and we haven't seen that yet. Jacksonville, LA Chargers. We've got LA minus 7.5, 8-point favorites, 49 the total. Yeah, I'm on the Chargers here. I'm laying the points. I was on Detroit against Jacksonville last week. The Chargers are off a bye week, but they're off a frustrating loss against the New Orleans Saints, which they had the lead. They led most of the game. They ended up losing in overtime. I think you get focus from the Chargers. What I'm always interested in when you're playing a bad team like a Jacksonville, is the team going to be focused? Is the team not going to take a team like the Jaguars lightly? I don't think the Chargers take the Jaguars lightly here in this game. I think they come ready to play. Jacksonville is showing their true colors right now. They had a good first 2 games. They covered the number. They beat Indy. They hung tough with Tennessee. Since then, 0-4 ATS. They failed to cover the number by double digits, blown out multiple games. They're non-competitive against Detroit. They're 1-5. And that's the key with all of these teams that are, around this 0-6 like the Jets are, 1-5 like Jacksonville is, tanking for Trevor. In the back of your mind, that's got to be there. That's got to be something you at least think of in the back of your mind. This is perhaps a once in a few years at least talent that could be available to you as your franchise quarterback in next year's draft. Trevor Lawrence out of Clemson. Does that become a thought process where, yeah, we'll say the right things. We'll say, hey, we're coming to play. We've got to finish off the season strong, but your actions don't match those words. Like, that's what it's been like with the Jets all year. They're talking about, oh, yeah, we got to get better. We got to be ready to play from the beginning. And you never see the words matching the actions on the field. I'm getting the sense that's the case with Jacksonville. This is a bad Jacksonville defense. There's no pass rush. Quarterbacks have all day to throw the football against them. And they can't stop the run either. That's going to be trouble here against the Chargers. I know the Chargers, in terms of the running back position, they've taken a hit with Austin Eckler on IR. They've got Joshua Kelly and Justin Jackson as their 2 running backs. I mean, that's a big downgrade from Austin Eckler. They miss him quite a bit. But I still think even with Kelly and Jackson in the backfield, that duo for the Chargers can do whatever they want running the football against this miserable run defense of the Jaguars. Keenan Allen showed up as questionable this week on the injury report. Limited in practice yesterday. It looks like, I'm just going to see if I can get an update here because coming off the bye, It looks like he's going to try to practice tomorrow. So I think somehow, some way he plays. I mean, they are coming off a bye week. It would be very, very surprising if Keenan Allen doesn't play in this game for the LA Chargers, but it's definitely an injury you want to keep an eye on. Mike Williams has stepped up, at wide receiver in recent games. They got Hunter Henry at tight end. Justin Herbert, I've been impressed. Yeah, he's made a couple mistakes. Any rookie quarterback's going to make a couple mistakes, but he's also really shown off his arm talent and his arm strength. He's made some big bomb throws down the field. He did it a couple of times against the Saints in the Monday night game a couple of weeks ago. I was really impressed with Herbert's arm. I think this is a spot where you don't overthink it. Don't try to outsmart yourself. Jacksonville really hasn't shown you much of anything the last several weeks. The fact that I'm laying points with Matt Patricia, all right? Matt Patricia last week and the Detroit Lions on the road, and I get an easy winner out of it? Are you kidding me? Against Jacksonville. That tells you all you need to know about what I think of Jacksonville right now. It's a team going nowhere. I think Doug Marrone the clock is ticking on him in terms of being the head coach of this team. Again, Gardner Minshew and the offense has slowed down a bit, but really it's the defense. You're not seeing the pass rush. You're not seeing the coverage down the field in the secondary. You're not seeing an ability to stop the run. You're not seeing anything good out of the Jaguar defense right now. I like the Chargers here. Anthony Lynn, in his tenure here with the Chargers, has not been a good favorite. That's the one little moment of pause that I have here. Do I really want to lay more than a touchdown now with Anthony Lynn, who's been a poor favorite over the years? But to me, this is a Chargers team that should have focus, has the bye week, coming off that frustrating loss against the New Orleans Saints. I think this is a spot where you lay points. And again, you're talking about a team now that has failed to cover the number in 4 straight games. And for Jacksonville, for me, it's at a point where I dare them to cover a number here and prove that they can cash a ticket for someone. And I don't think they can here. I think the Chargers take care of business and have the chance to win by double digits. Donnie, is that a Donnie Seymour? Donnie Rightside sighting in the chat. How are you, buddy? Good to see you. Welcome in. Good to see you. Thanks for popping in. We've only got a few games to go. This show, again, it never lasts an hour with me yammering on. You knew it would. You knew it would go over an hour. It has. But we're down to our last 2 games: Sunday nighter and Monday nighter. Tampa Bay Bucks, Las Vegas Raiders. Tampa Bay opened 2, went up to 3, 3.5. Then some Las Vegas money came in, and now the Tampa Bay money has come back in the last day or so, and for good reason, and I'll mention why in just a second. 51.5, 52 the total in this game, 52.5 as well in some spots. COVID-19 has reared its ugly head here for Las Vegas. Trent Brown, right tackle for the Las Vegas Raiders, really a key cog on that offensive line. You look at Las Vegas's offensive performances this year. When Trent Brown was out, the offense and the offensive line didn't protect for Derek Carr as well, didn't run block for Josh Jacobs as well. But they get him back against Kansas City 2 weeks ago, and we saw what him being back on that offensive line did for the Las Vegas Raiders. It made them definitely a better offense, capable of giving him Derek Carr opportunity to throw the football down the field. Now he's been diagnosed here with COVID-19. The offensive linemen are getting tested. I'm kind of scratching my head at John Gruden saying we got to hold the offensive linemen out. We got to get them tested. Don't you have to test everybody? Does Trent Brown not only fraternize with the offensive lineman? He doesn't talk to his quarterback. Derek Carr doesn't stand beside his quarterback, breathe into his face, or any wide receiver, or any defensive player, or any running back. Like, why are we only dealing with the offensive lineman here in this contact tracing scenario? Don't we have to sort of, get the entire team involved here when it comes to this? But it's just funny to hear Gruden yesterday talking about, the offensive linemen, we're concerned now with maybe that they've caught something here in terms of a potential positive. But, it's not Trent Brown, I'm sure, is talking to his quarterback, his running backs, his wide receivers, some of his defensive teammates. Don't you want to make sure that they don't have anything either? It was just funny hearing that. But obviously this is a big issue because if Brown's out, and I would sure if this game goes forward, he's not playing. What about the rest of the offensive line? If you've got an injury, or if you've got a depleted, I shouldn't say injury, this is not injury, this is COVID. If you have a depleted offensive line going into this game against a Tampa Bay Bucks team that has thrown just a plethora of pass rushers and defensive presence up front all season long, I'm impressed with the pass rush in the front 7 of the Bucks. And we saw it last week. They harassed Aaron Rodgers start to finish in the game. I know David Bakhtiari left the game due to injury for Green Bay, arguably their best offensive lineman. But it can't take away from Tampa Bay defensively what they did. They were swarming Rodgers all day, didn't give him much time, came up with the big picks. And again, that pressure forced him into those interceptions he made early second quarter, which completely flipped the game and turned it in Tampa Bay's favor when they were down 10-0 early in that game. So that Bucs defensive front can flat out get after it. And Levante David and company just flying around, making plays. If all of a sudden Las Vegas is coming into this game with an offensive line that's depleted, that is definitely something that concerns me going into this game. That is a matchup advantage by far for Tampa Bay. And you can understand why the betting markets are reacting the way they have with coming in on Tampa Bay after that news broke last week in the game. Tampa Bay played a really good game against Green Bay. It was probably a good spot for them. Remember, they lost that frustrating game against Chicago on Thursday Night Football. Before that, Brady's yelling at his offensive lineman during the game for bad penalties, not giving him enough time to throw the football downfield, just mistakes. And you figured Tampa Bay, with the extra time, that would benefit them. And I'll go back to that same thing I said. I'll give Tampa Bay credit for playing well last week, but Green Bay, I'll say this a million times, and I really hope you heed it because it's significant to me. It's in play with Seattle on Sunday, and it was in play with Green Bay last Sunday. When you're undefeated, rolling, everybody's talking about how good you are. You go into that bye week. You a lot of times come out of that bye week just laying an egg, and it's a clunker. I remember this happened to the Eagles, and in fact, Donnie, who's joined us in the chat, he knows this. There was a game a couple years ago with Carson Wentz and the Eagles. They got off to that undefeated start. They went into their bye week. Everybody was talking about how great the Eagles were that season. They came out of the bye week and they had a terrible game. Mistakes, penalties, turnovers, and they lost. And I always worry about these teams following the bye week when they've been rolling going into the bye week. It happened to Green Bay last week. I worry about that with Seattle this week against Arizona. And so I think Tampa Bay took advantage of that kind of situation a little bit last week against Green Bay. But Tom Brady and the offense is still not quite where it should be right now. They played better last week, but they're still stalling. Rob Gronkowski got going, which was good to see for the Bucs in that game last week. But, we'll see if they can progress and keep getting better. I've definitely not seen this offense completely take off just yet for the Bucs. That's the concern moving forward with them. But their defense, in terms of being able maybe to, and Derek Carr has had a good season. He really has. You look at Derek Carr's numbers. I'll bring them up here right now in terms of what he's done. 11-1 touchdown to interception ratio, 73% completion rate this year for Derek Carr. Those are really, really strong numbers. But how many of those games has he had the opportunity to stand back in the pocket, scan the field, and find his receivers down the field? If he's got a compromised offensive line Sunday night, and all indications are that he will going into this game, that's not necessarily something that's going to be a possibility for him to have all that time throwing the football. So that's definitely why I think it makes sense to take a little Tampa Bay. I did. I locked in Tampa Bay -3 because I knew the line was going to go up as soon as the news about the Raiders COVID-19 situation along the O-line became public news. Now it's just a question of how much further does this line go up, and do I buy back on Las Vegas at some point? I don't know, but I'm happy with Tampa Bay -3 at that number, just because I knew the line was going to go up, and we'll see what happens in terms of line movement and more news. And again, that's why it's difficult. This is a challenging season because you could get these COVID-19 announcements out of the blue. You think you've got a good number, and that's why it's difficult for me to lock in a ton of stuff early in the week, not only in NFL, but college football as well. Fluid situations, constantly evolving, constantly changing situations with so many teams this year. It's making it a more difficult handicap, especially if you're one of those people that likes betting games early in the week. All right, last game, finally at the end of the card here, Monday Night Football. LA Rams, Chicago Bears. We've got the LA Rams 6-point favorites at home, 45 the total in this game. LA Rams didn't have a very good game last week against San Francisco. But if you look at the LA Rams schedule going into that game last week against San Francisco, You know, their schedule in terms of travel has been extremely tough on them. I mean, and because they are actually, and Sean McVay and the Rams are one of those teams that decided we're not going to stay in the East time zone or on the East Coast in between our road trips. You look at their season. They opened at home against Dallas. They went on the road to play Philadelphia. They actually came back home after beating Philadelphia, came back to LA, flew back east to Buffalo for that wild 35-32 loss to the Bills, came back home and faced the Giants, went back on the road to face the Washington Redskins on the East Coast, flew back west and played the San Francisco 49ers last week. So that is east or west to east, and then east to west to east, and then back to west to play the Giants, back to the east to play Washington, and then back to the west to play in San Francisco last week. That's a shit ton of traveling coast to coast. And I'm not just talking about little itty bitty travel. I'm talking about coast to coast travel right now with this LA Rams team. So I don't want to excuse them for losing to San Francisco last week, but it was that one of those spots where you just run out of gas. I mean, you do all that traveling back and forth coast to coast, and you're just not sharp. You're not mentally sharp. You're not physically fresh. And I think we saw that with the Rams last week. Sloppy performance, poor on their part. Jared Goff didn't play well at all, actually, in that 24-16 loss to the 49ers. How concerned are you that the Rams may not be elite? They may be good, but they're not elite, because you start to look at the wins they've accumulated this year. Dallas, Philadelphia, the New York Giants, and Washington. All 4 wins against the worst division in football, the NFC least. Washington, the Giants, Philly, and Dallas. Those are the 4 victories this year for the LA Rams. That's not impressive. That's not a good resume at all. You know, the decent teams you played, decent to good teams, Buffalo and San Francisco, you lost them. So you better believe this is concerning right now for the San Francisco, for the LA Rams. Now, how good are they? You know, and Jared Goff, when he plays well, this team plays well. When he doesn't, they don't win and they don't cover. And we saw that last week. He played well against Philly. He played well against Dallas. He played well against Washington. But last week he didn't play well. I mean, but the 4 wins for the Rams being the NFC East, that worries me. And I don't want to lay 6 here with the Rams. You know, they're in a good spot. They're finally staying on the West Coast for a change. They just got a small little travel from San Francisco to LA, you know, after Sunday night last week. But finally, they don't have to do west to east travel. They're taking on the Bears, who now have to go out to the West Coast for this. But I remember Jared Goff playing the Bears in Chicago either last year or 2 years ago, but it was fairly recent. And the Bears defense made life hell on him. Now, I know that was in Chicago, and we've talked about at times the home-road dichotomy in Jared Goff at times, where he's played a lot better at home than he has on the road. But it's not just the home-road thing. It is the elite pass rush or a capable pass rush versus a team that doesn't have a great pass rush. That, to me, is also the dichotomy where you get good Goff versus bad Goff. Do you have a team that doesn't have a great pass rush, or do you have a team that can get pressure on opposing quarterbacks? Chicago can. I was impressed with what they did against Carolina last week. They got pressure on Teddy Bridgewater. I haven't seen Teddy Bridgewater make a ton of mistakes this year. Well, he made some last week against that Chicago defense. You know, they frustrated Tom Brady. Offensive line was taking penalties, holding penalties a couple weeks ago when the Bears played the Bucs. So that defense, the way they're playing the last couple weeks, Carolina and the Tampa game, this Chicago defense, that might be enough to keep them in this game. I would only look to the Bears here at getting 6 points in this Monday Night Football game against the Rams. I don't love betting against McVay off a loss, you know, but because you know he's a good coach, he's going to make adjustments. But, you know, I worry about that Chicago defensive front against a quarterback in Goff, who when he's under pressure, that's when he makes the mistakes. That's when he's inaccurate. That's when he chucks the football up in the air and the mistakes and the interceptions happen. So to me, I would definitely be interested in the Chicago side a little bit. Again, I haven't bet it yet. It's Monday Night Football, still several days away. But right now I'm leaning toward the Bears in this one, and also leaning under the total. It's already gone down from 46 to 45 in this game. In terms of unders, Chicago Rams and San Francisco, New England are my two favorite unders this week. No question about it. I think even Dallas, Washington could stay under the total, even though Dallas's defense is hideous. Washington's got a good defense. Dallas's defense, Washington will at least be a much weaker offense than the recent teams that Dallas has played. So those are the games that I think have the best shot for unders this week. Dallas, Washington, San Francisco, New England, and also this game here with the Rams and the Bears on Monday Night Football. Jacksonville Chargers could stay under as well. Jacksonville's defense is horrible, but their offense to me is not going to do much against that Chargers defense this week. A Chargers defense that I think is better than they've shown in recent weeks. Let's not forget the Chargers have played some pretty good quarterbacks. They've already played Kansas City this year. They played Drew Brees and the Saints. They played Tom Brady and the Bucks. And now you're playing Minshew. So that's another game I think could be a sneaky under this weekend in the NFL. But as far as Bears-Rams goes, to wrap up this show, lean Chicago +6, lean under the total. Haven't bet anything yet. But if I go in either direction, side or total with Monday Night Football, I would look to Chicago and also look under the total Monday Night Football with the Bears and Rams. That'll wrap it up. We've gotten through every game on the NFL Week 7 card. I'm not going to be talking college football on this show anymore. It's going to be just an NFL show every Thursday moving forward because I've got the Saturday morning show, the college football closing time show, Saturday morning right here on the Pub Sports Radio channel with Connor Mack and I breaking down the Saturday college football card. So we're going to save college football till Saturday. I guess I'll throw out a couple thoughts on the Thursday, Friday games. I kind of like Tulsa laying 10.5 against South Florida. Tulsa's played a stronger schedule than South Florida, including Oklahoma State and UCF. Tulsa played those two teams very tough. South Florida, to me, has no defense whatsoever. The difference in defense between those two teams is night and day. I kind of like Illinois plus points against Wisconsin. There's a lot of people talking about Wisconsin revenge, and they're going to want to kick the snot out of Illinois. I don't know if they've got the team to do it. They've got a new starting quarterback. The offense loses Jonathan Taylor, running back, Quintez Cephas, the receiver from last year. They've got some changes to that offense. Illinois was 6-1 ATS as a Big Ten underdog last year. They were great Big Ten conference underdogs last year. Revenge, I get it, but they're happy enough just to win the game. I think it's a few too many points to lay with Wisconsin in that game. And I'm more and more interested in UAB Blazers now. I'm amazed that as much money's come in on UL Lafayette. They've been an overvalued point spread commodity. They haven't covered in 3 straight games. They've lost, of course, outright to Coastal Carolina last week in Sunbelt action. They're facing a really good UAB team. Lucero at quarterback has been really, really good. Spencer Brown, outstanding running back, really good defense as well, UAB. I don't understand why now they're a home underdog against UL Lafayette in this game on Friday night. And here's a stat for you. UAB on their home field, 21-0 straight up at home, 15-4-2 against the spread in their last 21 home games. That's the UAB Blazers, 21-0 straight up, 15-4-2 against the spread in their last 21 home games. This has been a really strong home field for them. I'm just puzzled that we may be able to get UAB +3. I'm betting UAB for sure, but if we can somehow get UAB at 3 or better before kickoff, that's going to be even better. They opened 2-point home favorites. UL Lafayette is now a 2.5 point road favorite in this game. UL Lafayette, there's an infatuation with that team in the betting markets. They take money every single week, despite the fact they haven't covered a point spread since their season opening outright upset win as underdogs against Iowa State, which was a very long time ago. So I like UAB there at a better number now that everybody's flocking on Lafayette. Everybody was flocking to Lafayette last week against Coastal Carolina, and I was alone on an island with Coastal plus the points, and Coastal wins outright. So maybe it's that scenario all over again in that game on Friday night. All right, guys, thank you to everyone in the chat for tuning in. I love the turnout for this show today. We had Prince of the City, Noli Knows, Dom Ricci, Donnie Rightside, everybody in the Jansen, Tony, Gerald Jones, great contributions. Good luck to all of you, Pie Guy, Tony, everyone that joined us for the show today. Colorado Bull, Razor Sharp, who also does lots of great work here on the Pub Sports Radio YouTube channel. Everybody, Asher D as well. Everybody that joined the chat. JStone9, who's of course also a faithful follower of mine with the Ice Guys Hockey Show. Everybody that joined the show today in the chat, thank you very much. Hope you enjoyed it. We broke down every Week 7 NFL game. That'll wrap it up. Remember, every Thursday, 1 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time, right here on the Pub Sports Radio YouTube channel. Ian Cameron's Football Frenzy, breaking down every NFL game from a betting perspective. Reminder to check out as well pubsportsradio.com and the Pub Sports Radio YouTube channel daily for great shows and great content. Thank you for watching, everybody. Good luck this weekend with all of your bets in NFL action. Thank you for watching. I'm Ian Cameron. This has been the Ian Cameron's Football Frenzy on Pub Sports Radio. I'll be back with you next Thursday, 1 p.m. Eastern Time, for another edition of Ian Cameron's Football Frenzy.